Hey everybody, this is TCG Productions here, and today we're going to be servicing the spare gaming rig. Yes, the SPGR, last seen on any sort of video in any format a little over 2.5 years ago, actually. This is January 4th, 2025, and we're supposed to have something along the lines of some winter storm style weather blowing in tomorrow, Sunday, January 5th. 2025, and so basically it's supposed to rain tomorrow, and then temperatures are supposed to go crashing through the floor to about 25 degrees. Basically it's supposed to rain, then it's all supposed to freeze. And so I need to get this thing ready to go out the door tonight, so that way first thing tomorrow I can actually get it out the door. And, well, you kind of see what I'm working with here. So tomorrow I can actually get this thing out the door, back to Gavin, and it's not stuck here until the 13th or something. It's not stuck here until the 13th or something like that, waiting on the roads to not be horrible, icy bricks that are totally unsafe to drive on for absolutely any reason or purpose whatsoever. So basically, here's what we're going to be doing to this system tonight. We are going to be putting it in. We're going to be putting this system into a bigger and better computer case. I know it's kind of hard to see right now, A, because I have other stuff on top of the case in question, and B, because the camera isn't panned over there yet. There we go. This, I'm going to presume, a 2004 era Antec case that I got as part of the big carload of random computer stuff from an old high school instructor. We're going to be upgrading the CPU from an Intel Pentium G3258 to an Intel Core i7-4770S, and we're going to be upgrading the RAM from 8 gigabytes to 16 gigabytes. And for any of y'all that have been watching my channel for quite a long time, at least eight years, or for those who have actually watched back through my video backlog, going back to around 2016 or thereabouts, you'll know that my main computer at the time in 2016 had 8 gigabytes of RAM in it. And yes, 8 years later, in fact almost 9 years later, the memory kit that I've got is still in use to this very day. So, but basically, this is, I think, an NVIDIA, either a 970 or a 980 or a 1080, GTX 1080 card that my friend Gavin upgraded to a number of months back. And, well, let's just say this computer has been through the ringer with all of the... This computer's been through the ringer. This case has been through the ringer. And the computer story definitely isn't ending here tonight, but the case is definitely going into a much-deserved retirement. So, what we're going to start with, I think the first thing that I want to do is disconnect this Molex madness. So yeah, we're gonna start by disconnecting some of this electrical madness going on in here. Starting with the Molex adapter going to whatever this is. It goes to the two side fans over here, and then the side panel goes away, and it will not be, that side panel goes away, and there's probably some semi-relevant Gamer's Nexus reference that I can paste in here or something, I don't know. But yeah, and then well, I'm not sure what to do next. I'm gonna maybe take a Sawzall to this thing and hack the computer out of the rest of the case. The GPU is going to be a bugbear to get out, because the GPU kind of ended up crammed in here against its will. And the graphics card ended up crammed into the computer case against its will, because the case is entirely too small to actually fit the graphics card, but the graphics card was still forced in here anyways. And so, yeah. The graphics card was definitely forced in here anyways. It is not very happy to be here at all. And I'm surprised I'm honestly surprised he actually managed to make the thing fit, let alone get the screws threaded in somewhere where it was obviously intended. They were never intended to be threaded up to. And then I get to extract the GPU out of here somehow, and I, surprisingly enough, did not break the slot off of the motherboard in doing so. So yeah, oh, it's an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1060 with 6 gigabytes of VRAM. Technically, it's an MSI GeForce GTX 1060 Gaming X. So they've been at the job. They've been going with the trend of putting gaming on anything to do with gaming for quite some time. So this is nothing new to MSI. And if you're wondering exactly what I'm referencing, well, my old motherboard that I pulled out of my main workstation a month or two ago, a couple months ago, is the MSI PCMate Z97, which I typically refer to as an MSI MS-7850, mainly because it's easier to refer to it that way. And then the motherboard I put into it is an MSI MPG X870E Carbon Wi-Fi, also known as an MSI MS-7E49. So, yeah, I think the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to unplug the case fan and then start disconnecting some of the power wiring. It becomes a lot cleaner once I get the GPU out of it. That's way too big for the computer case. And then it's honestly not a whole lot really to just go in here and unplug everything else. And just like that, the power supply is disconnected. It's not quite ready to come out though. Get the SATA cable right here. A hard drive in here, and we've got the wireless card, which has been moved down, so that way the screw is just barely holding. So that way the screw is just barely holding on to it. So Asus PCE-AC68, except a failing motherboard, has not actually had the chance to munch on it and make it do very irritating things, such as slowly degrade into complete and total electrical instability that would sometimes cause my main workstation, that would sometimes cause a Linux kernel running on my main workstation to lose the plot so badly that it would absolutely and completely lock up anytime I try to reboot the system. So I think, no, I don't have everything disconnected actually. Now I do. This Molex connector here, this wire here, that snakes its way over to the front panel LED light. And yes, I have kind of hacked on to this power supply's wiring harness a bit. But so far there doesn't seem to be really any complaints of the system shutting down or gaining characterful behavior under load, other than the GPU doing what most GPUs usually do under load and sounding like a combination freight train and jet turbine at full power. So that's the power supply out of the system, and we're already looking a whole lot better. Then go ahead and take the screws out. I am strongly considering replacing all of the motherboard screws, because these are still the original motherboard screws that I got with the case whenever I got the case like 10 years ago. And these screws were never the best to begin with. These screws were never the best to begin with. And if you cranked down on these real hard, the usual result would be that you would strip it out, or you would pretty much permanently weld it to the stand. You would pretty much permanently friction weld it to the standoff that you had screwed it into. And the next time you unscrewed it, you would usually end up pulling the entire standoff out. You would usually end up unscrewing the entire standoff out of the computer case. So there's the motherboard, an Asus H81M-C/CSM. And yes, this is the same motherboard I was running in my main workstation up until about June of 2016, and there's the screw that was rattling around in the case whenever I brought this system in. But that is the same motherboard that I got back in the middle of 2014, whenever my old motherboard, the Gigabyte G41MT-S2PT motherboard, whenever that motherboard keeled over and died on me in June 2014. And so what happened after that is I got this Asus H81M-C/CSM motherboard. So now I need to take this side of the case off because there's some screws that I need to get to. And okay, that used to be a thumb screw, but the plastic part cracked off and disappeared long ago. Same with this one apparently. And it tried to make a run for it, but was unfortunately stopped by the sheer fact that the dimensions of this table did not prohibit it to make a run that far. So now we've got some 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws. I knew I had a hard drive somewhere that one of the screws had actually cracked off and left the screw stalk permanently stuck in the drive, and I just found it. It is way down in there. There it is. Yes, the head is completely cracked off and the stalk is very permanently stuck in the drive. And this has a lot of slot to it now. There we go. Had to tighten up an adjustment on the tripod. So I'll get all the screws out over here. One for the hard drive. There's one way up in there for the card reader. And then there's 2 for the optical drive. So I really don't know where that other screw could have come from unless it somehow magically appeared during transit or whenever the GPU was upgraded. I don't know how long it's been rattling around inside the computer case, but if it's been rattling around in there since the GPU was upgraded, I'm honestly surprised this system has managed to live to tell the tale. So we've got 2 more screws for the optical drive, and then I can eject that out of the front of the case, probably at Mach 3 or something like that, at which point it will go crashing through my shelves, through the south wall of the house, through the garage door, and then we'll have an optical drive that is on a one-way flight to South. Then we'll have an optical drive that's on a one-way flight to South America, and an optical drive-shaped hole in the house. Much to the dismay of everybody. So. Oh, do I have to... I have to slide... No, I don't. Okay. We have a 1 terabyte Western Digital Blue hard drive with 64 megabytes of onboard cache. And then the optical drive, as previously mentioned, just gets slid out of the front. Or maybe not. Oh, okay. I guess it's decided to have an attempt at permanently wedging itself up. Manufactured April of 2014. So, yeah, this is the SATA optical drive that I got whenever I had to, again, rebuild my main computer in the middle of 2014 after the old motherboard went belly up on me. Because that system still had an IDE optical drive in it at the time, but the ASUS drive went into it after the old motherboard died. So, and then we have a Manhattan branded, probably rebranded Chinese generic zillion-in-one card reader, which probably hasn't seen hardly any use since I originally built this system. And then the old case, which weighs like 0.1 of nothing, goes away. And the new case, which weighs about 0.3 of nothing, comes in. So this is a new computer case, and as you can see, it's bigger and more spacious than the old one. And I almost unscrewed the height adjustment lock right off the tripod. Amazing. So, yeah, this is a pretty much full-size ATX computer case from like 2004. So, one thing I will need to do is readjust all of the standoffs and everything for a micro ATX motherboard. And that reminds me, stand off there, stand off there. Yeah, this has definitely not been set up for a full size. This has definitely been set up for probably a full size ATX motherboard. And it looks like this could also fit those horrible, nasty, semi-proprietary-ish motherboards where the CPU heatsink is also load-bearing, as Gamers Nexus will say. And so let's see. These micro ATX boards are a stupid simple design in terms of the mounting. You pretty much have 6 screws, and the 3 on this side are pretty much in a vertical line with one another, just about. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I should just be able to drop this into place, and all 6 of them. Okay, it's a really good thing I checked, because I put a standoff in the wrong spot there. And had I actually screwed everything down and applied power to the system before doing that, without checking or anything, then that would have been a motherboard up in smoke. So, yeah, that would have been a motherboard up in smoke, and I would have been buying my friend a new computer. And I have already rebuilt 2 systems, and I rebuilt my main workstation in like late October, early November. I rebuilt the file server in December. I do not want to have to unexpectedly rebuild a friend's computer in January. So, and then this standoff down here, of course, it's the one that's not actually necessary to be moved for any reason whatsoever. So it is therefore the tightest standoff in the computer case, and I'm going to have to get a pair of pliers to unwedge it from its spot. Not only am I going to need to have a pair of pliers for that, I'm going to need to have a pair of pliers to go ahead and set all of the other standoffs into position. So we'll be back in just a moment. So now that I have a convenient pair of pliers, I know you can't really see anything down there, and I don't want to dismount the camera from the tripod, but basically it's way down here in the corner by the 7th PCI slot bracket. But just put a pair of pliers on that, twisted counterclockwise, and out it came. Then I'll use these and more or less just lock all the others into position. These actually look like they're proper standoffs, not the cheap Chinese ones that are in the old case, where if you torque a screw down too hard in them, you will either damage the standoff or damage the screw or friction weld the two together, and then the two will be one unit, and I'll just have to replace them regardless. So, but yeah, it looks like this case is set up for a decent number of various various motherboard form factors and whatnot. So there we go. Here's my box of various case screws and related hardware and componentry. I thought I had a thing in here for motherboard standoffs, but I guess my jar of computer related screws is the home for those. So I'll see if the screws that I took out of the old case will fit in these standoffs, and they will, surprisingly enough. So to avoid the hassle of having to go and find, kind of will, but the thread pitch is just wrong enough that it doesn't really work. So that means I need to go find 6 actually decent computer screws. There we go. Actually make it 5, because I'm going to count the one in the computer case. That was already in the computer case as one of those screws. Yeah, I don't know why computer manufacturers have decided that we should be getting away from these kinds of screws. You know, standard combination Phillips and hex head, and they've got the locking tabs on them. I don't think those are really tabs. They're kind of a knurled or threaded design to help lock them into place so that they don't back out during transit. I don't know why computer manufacturers have suddenly decided to get away from these kinds of screws, but it's really annoying whenever I'm in the middle of a computer project and I suddenly realize that I need to go get more screws of a different type, because some manufacturers decided to be cheeky, dumb, stupid, proprietary, or a combination of any or all of the above, and therefore require that I go get a different kind of screw. Because to quote Jamie Zawinski, the future is stupid. Just like those maddening LED headlights on cars. And is it just me? Or does it seem like the low beam cutoff on headlights is getting worse, well, lazier and lazier and lazier as time goes on? So, see, those are for the expansion slots. There we go. Watch this be the one screw that doesn't fit any of these. Okay, I guess it does fit. Okay, so now that I've got all the standoffs in place and all the screws in place, I can remember to remove the I/O shield. And then I can go ahead and pop that into place up here. There we go. And now I think we should be mostly set to go ahead and put this motherboard back in place. And basically I'm doing this in 2 phases. The first phase is to go ahead and recase the entire system, and go ahead and recase the entire system first and verify that everything will work as is before the upgrades. And then once I verify that everything works and whatnot, then I will carry out the upgrades, which basically involves the CPU and the RAM. Windows will probably get mad at me and ask me to relicense it. Yeah, Windows will probably get mad at me and ask me to relicense it or enter a new product key, to which I have a particularly special response. Okay, there we go. Again, screws and computer manufacturers doing weird things with them. Either that or I have a standoff in this case. They're just slightly proprietary enough. And now the two have friction welded themselves together. And is trying to break the motherboard into multiple pieces from that corner. Either that or I've just destroyed the threads on the screw. No, the screw and standoff are now permanently one piece. Yeah, okay. I think the screw and standoff are now permanently one piece. So now I get to take the motherboard back out. And of course it's not going to come out cleanly. I'm going to have to sit here and back the standoff out of the case with it. You know, I was hoping to get away with only needing a Phillips head screwdriver for this, but I think it's safe to say at this point that that is long since gone all the way completely out the window, because I have now broken out not only a pair of needle nose pliers, but also a flathead screwdriver. And yeah, I guess it's decided to take the standoff out of the case with it. Either that or try to eat my motherboard alive. Lovely. We'll be right back after these quick messages from Binford Tools. Well, a number of minutes later and a number of pennies shorter, I managed to finally get everything back into... managed to get the motherboard reinstalled back into the computer case. Basically what happened is the standoff and the screw tried to friction weld themselves into a singular component, and then the interaction between the motherboard and the I/O shield kept, and the positioning of the screw down there, they all conspired against me, and the end result was that I was not able to remove the motherboard unless I popped the I/O shield out and took and took it with the motherboard. And in the process of doing so, I managed to completely and utterly mangle the hole that the standoff goes into in the case, and so there just isn't going to be a standoff there anymore ever. So, yay. So, yeah, a little bit later, a few minutes later and a few pennies shorter, and here we are. The motherboard is now securely mounted back up into the computer case. And so we've got a single chassis fan connector. I'll plug one of the case fans in there. However, I think I'm going to have to break out a Molex adapter to get the front case fan plugged in. So, and then we have this wonderful, amazing mess of wires for the USB ports on the front of the case. I hate it whenever I have to figure out what's what and who's who here and whatnot, especially whenever I don't actually have pinouts readily available on the motherboard. However, what I do have readily available to me is a case that also has the wiring right here. So it looks like the order from left to right is going to be red, white, green, and black. So red, white, green, and black. So red, white, green, and then we've got 2 ground wires because we can, probably a shield if I had to guess. So red, white, green, and black. It's like I'm pinning up an Ethernet cable. And then I'll manually hold everything in as best of an alignment as I can reasonably manage. And there we go. Red, white, green, black. Then I get to do it one more time because one just wasn't enough. So fun, I get to do it twice. There we go. Maybe I can zoom in on that a little bit better. So red, white, green, and black. I'm even splaying the wires out like it is an Ethernet cable. So red, white, red, white, and the shield goes away, green, and black. Yeah, I think I can see why the USB ports were never actually wired up on this case whenever I got it. Red, white, green, and black. Some motherboard manufacturers are nice and they tell you what the pinout is of all the headers on the motherboard. Other motherboard manufacturers are not. And so you have to go running to either find pinouts online, or you have to dig up another case or anything of that sorts. And then just for thorough completeness' sake, I'll connect the shield on the other USB cable to the shield on the other USB, on the other front panel USB header. And apparently I moved this whole thing, and so none of this was visible to the camera. So then we've got the power and hard drive LEDs, and then a couple of auxiliary cables, and a couple of cables here for auxiliary LEDs, which I don't presently have a use for. And for whatever reason, the power LED button is The power LED header here is 3 pins wide, while the hard disk LED header is 2 pins wide. At least we have a fairly conventional 4-pin speaker here I can plug into. And we've got another header here for reset switch. Where is the power button? Oh, there it is. And reset would be on bottom. Power switch will be on top. And just looking at that, yeah, and there's no good way I can repin that. So what I'll do is I'll take the number 1 auxiliary LED and connect that up to where the power button is supposed to be connected. So I'm connect that up to where the power button is supposed to be connected. And that should, I think, take care of the wiring jungle in this computer case. And then we've got another fan here, and I'll need to break out one of those Molex adapters. And now I think it's time to go ahead, install a hard drive, and install the card reader. So, hard drive will go into this hard drive, this combination hard drive and front panel expansion cage. And because we're dealing with a hard drive that has a screw stalk sheared off in there, it will probably never come out. And that will probably never be coming out again. Yeah, that is very, very seized in there. I have to find some way or another. There we go. Well, maybe not. Maybe I just permanently jammed it in there. That might be lovely. There we go. There we go. I had to splay the side of this out just a little bit. But now the other 3 screws should line up. And then we get to install the USB card reader. And I have absolutely no idea how far forward this has to be to have any sort of hope of making it out the front panel. So then I also need to tilt the case up. Yeah, tilt the case up so that way I can get access to the front panel, open it up, find out that I may or may not have to take the front panel off of the system. Which I have a severe disinclination towards at this particular moment. Especially considering I already have a flat-bladed screwdriver. Use that screwdriver to my advantage and pop one of the blanking plates. Pop the blanking plate out of one of the 3.5 inch front panel expansion bays. And I can dry fit this by sliding it into place. sliding the bay into place and locking it down. And then there we go. That looks good in there. Finding out where it is, and then running a couple of screws into place to keep it from wandering off into the nether regions of the computer case. Now the thing is with these card readers and whatnot that are molded out of plastic, they're really great in terms of convenience and whatnot, in terms of ease of installation and everything. Because you don't have to worry about lining up a couple of screws exactly right and everything. But at the same time, you have to tighten it up enough that it is reasonably snug, but not so tight that you strip out the delicate threads that you've just formed in the plastic and ruin the screw hole. And make that screw hole completely unusable. And then you end up with a situation where you might not have a properly secured card reader, which slips back into the case every single time you can do so much as breathe on it. So there we go. We're all screwed in and screwed up. Slipping into the case, flip the lock lever over to the lock position, and move on to the next part. Move on to the next thing here, which I think is going to be to install the optical drive. Now, seeing as this computer case does not have a removable, seeing how this computer case, only this side comes off, the other side is permanently riveted into place, that means that we've got rails, these plastic rails. So many early 2000s computer cases used these plastic rails, and that is at best it's merely annoying, especially whenever it's easy to use a different type of screw and do a complete end run around actually needing to use these rails on optical and hard drives. And at worst, it is totally inconvenient, or maddening even, whenever the rails are some super weird proprietary form factor and you cannot find any replacements for, you can't find any replacements anywhere at all ever to save mine, yours, or anybody else's life. So, but now that we have the mounting rail attached to the side of the optical drive, go ahead, tilt the case up, open the front cover, and then it'll just simply be a matter of sliding this in until it clicks into place. Either that or goes plunging straight to the bottom of the case somewhere. And it's not an absolute mounting rail, as in you click the mounting rail into place and just like that the drive is permanently affixed and the drive is fixed into position. No, that just keeps the that side of the drive from plunging straight to the bottom of the case, where it will probably execute the halt catch fire instruction or absolutely mutilate the optical disc, which you just put in there, a la Xbox 360. So I think what I'll do is I'll just run this thing all the way to the back here. The screw holes are wallowed out, and the screw holes in the drive are stripped out, so I can only barely snug the screws up. But since they already need to be at the very back of the then we're good. The drive is a little bit loosey-goosey in there, but frankly, I don't care. So, then, as I'm plugging in a USB card reader, then that means I need to unplug the other shield wire from the USB port, from the other USB header on the motherboard, so one of these wires will just be unshielded. And in typical fashion, I can't actually hope to get the camera to see what I'm trying to do in here. Oh wait, maybe, yes I can. So USB, the header on the motherboard that's labeled USB 10, that's where this is going to be plugged into. A simple matter of plug and play, or in the early days of plug and play on ISA, on the ISA expansion bus, more like ISA plug and pray. You plug the card in and pray that it doesn't eat all your system resources or create some, no doubt, incredibly interesting, or more likely incredibly irritating hardware conflict, which breaks absolutely everything, and if you get really unlucky, it bricks your Windows install. And then you have to reinstall Windows and restore from backups and do all of that fun stuff to get your computer back up and running. Especially if you've made the terrible mistake of plugging a Sound Blaster All32 card, I think like a CT3990, into a system which is barely into a system which is barely translated CHS aware or ready. So I'll go ahead reinstall one of the expansion cards, the Asus PCE-AC68 wireless card, and fit that into place. Let's go ahead and fit one of the expansion slot brackets back into place. And then we've got the graphics card. And I'm hoping this fits. Okay. Well, this is suboptimal. The hard drive is in the way. So the hard drive needs to go up. I think it needs to go up 2 slots, which then I think puts it into conflict with the, I think that would then put it into conflict with the card reader. I don't know, let me see. Okay, so the hard drive pretty much needs to go to the very top of the 3.5-inch expansion device cage. We'll be back.
Or is it the DHL? Either way, which one is it? You're not serious. Patient's now starting to fray, I think.